I want you to pull up a mental image right now. It's a picture that is probably burned into the brain of anyone who has ever cracked a history book about the Middle East or studied religion even in passing. The cave.
The foundational scene.
Exactly. You have the solitude, the jagged mountain, the silence, the Prophet Muhammad, seeking clarity, and then that moment of contact. The revelation. It's like the big bang of the Islamic faith.
It is the absolute bedrock of the seerah, the traditional biography. I mean, it is how the story has been told, taught, and visualized for 1,400 years.
But, and this is a massive but, we have a stack of research in front of us today that suggests we might be reading the map wrong. And I don't just mean the geographical map.
Though we're definitely going to get to that.
Oh, we are. But
yeah.
I mean the linguistic map, the very words themselves.
Well, we're looking at the extensive work of Dr. Khaled Waleed, specifically from his project Almighty Covenant. And, radical is probably the only word that fits here. Yes. He isn't just suggesting a minor edit to the footnotes. He is arguing that the version of the story most people know is actually a product of centuries of folklore.
Folklore.
He calls it Jahiliyyah. Now, usually that word refers to the age of ignorance before Islam. But Dr. Waleed argues a form of that ignorance crept back in after the fact, turning precise, technical, spiritual terms into, well, fairy tales.
So his argument is that if you strip away the history books, the commentaries, the he said, she said, and just look at the raw Arabic words, the text tells a completely different story.
A radically different story.
Yeah.
His whole methodology is based on Lokat al-Arab, the root linguistic logic of the language. And when he applies that to the story of the cave, the result was disruptive.
Disruptive is putting it mildly. Based on Dr. Waleed's research, the cave isn't where we think it is. The person inside isn't who we think it is, and the controversial marriage that happens later.
Not a marriage to a woman at all.
It completely restructures the timeline. Instead of a domestic story about a man in a desert, Dr. Waleed presents us with a massive, almost bureaucratic transfer of spiritual authority between two ancient faiths.
That's a good way to put it.
Okay, I am hooked, but I'm also skeptical. We need to build this from the ground up. Let's start with the setting, the scene. Dr. Waleed focuses on three specific words: gar, sakra, and kaf.
This is where the linguistic precision starts. In standard translations, or just, in casual conversation, you'll hear these translated loosely as cave or rock.
Right, people use them interchangeably.
Exactly. But Dr. Waleed argues that in the strict logic of the language, these are not synonyms. They are architectural components of a single, massive structure.
So walk us through the visual he paints. If I'm standing there, what am I actually looking at?
Okay, imagine you're approaching a massive geological formation. The landmark you see from a distance, that's the sakra, the rock. It's the external object, the roof, if you will.
Okay, so sakra is the mountain or the boulder itself.
Correct. Now, as you get closer to the rock, you find a specific opening. That opening is the gar. Linguistically, the root of gar implies something that plunges or goes deep, like a tunnel or an entry point.
So the gar is the doorway, the vestibule.
Exactly. And once you pass through that gar and descend, you enter the interior chamber. That space is the kaf. So you have the rock, the entry, and the interior. Three perspectives, one location.
But why does this distinction matter so much? I mean, why split hairs over the entryway versus the room?
Because Dr. Waleed argues this specific configuration. A massive rock with a plunging entrance leading to a hollow cave beneath it isn't just some random geological feature you'd find in the Hejaz Mountains.
He says it matches one specific place.
One very famous place on Earth, what he calls the Mecca of Al-Quds.
Al-Quds? You mean Jerusalem?
Yes. Specifically, the foundation rock in Jerusalem, the one on the Temple Mount. If you've ever seen diagrams, there's the rock itself, and beneath it is a cave known as the Well of Souls.
Wait, so he's saying the Cave of the Revelation wasn't near Mecca in Saudi Arabia at all?
He's claiming it was in Jerusalem. That moved the entire geography of the first revelation by about 1,000 kilometers.
That is a huge claim.
It is, and it's a core premise. He's positing that the prophet wasn't just isolating in a remote desert. He was seeking knowledge inside the existing spiritual center of the monotheistic world. He was in the sanctuary.
That context changes the mood immediately. If you're in a cave in the desert, you're hiding. If you're in the cave under the rock in Jerusalem, you're stepping into an institution.
You're entering the Holy of Holies.
Exactly. It reframes the event from a personal spiritual journey to an institutional one. And that brings us to the next, arguably bigger mystery. If the prophet is in this specific sanctuary, who is in there with him?
This brings us to the figure of Zayd,
Right. And for anyone with a passing knowledge of Islamic history, Zayd is a known quantity. Zayd bin Haritha, the Prophet's adopted son, a former slave, a beloved companion.
He's the only companion mentioned by name in the Quran. That's the biography we all know. But Dr. Waleed looks at the text and says, stop. Zayd here is not a proper name.
Not a name, but it's written right there.
He argues that treating it as a name is part of that folklore problem. He takes it back to the linguistic root. Z-Y-D, ziyada.
Ziyada. That means increase, right?
Yes. So linguistically, Zayd refers to al-Mustasid, the one who is seeking an increase, specifically an increase in knowledge. It's a title. It's a function, not a name on a birth certificate.
So Zayd isn't like Bob. Zayd is the seeker, the candidate.
The student of knowledge is a good analogy. But here's the twist, and this is where his theory really flips the script. He identifies this Mustazid, this seeker, not as a former slave or a young man, but as a figure of immense established authority.
Oh.
He argues this person was actually a high-ranking Israelite scholar.
Wait, an Israelite scholar in the cave with the Prophet?
Yes. Dr. Waleed describes him as the grand rabbi or the greatest of the 70 judges of the children of Israel. He calls him a witness for Bani Israel.
So paint the picture for us. The dynamic in the cave is the Prophet Muhammad and the Grand Rabbi of Jerusalem sitting together.
That is the scenario. And the dynamic is fascinating. They are sitting together in this fellowship of knowledge. The Israelite scholar is the Mustazid. He's the seeker here because he's waiting for the final truth. He knows the prophecies. He's waiting for the successor.
So even though he holds the chair of religious authority,
he's still a seeker because he hasn't found the final piece of the puzzle yet.
This is a completely different image than the traditional story. It's a theological summit. You have the representative of the Old Covenant and the receiver of the New Covenant,
meeting in the holiest place on earth. And they aren't just chatting. They're engaging in a transfer of knowledge. And this concept of a fellowship, this professional pairing, is what leads to the most controversial part of the story, the marriage.
Okay, we have to talk about this. The story of Zayd and Zainab. Historically, this is messy.
It is.
The traditional narrative says the Prophet saw Zayd's wife, Zainab, and then Zayd divorced her so the Prophet could marry her. It's been used by critics for centuries.
It's often framed as a soap opera moment. And Dr. Waleed is incredibly firm on this. He categorizes that entire domestic drama as kadhib-layais, slander. He says it paints the prophet as being driven by personal desire, which contradicts prophethood.
So if he just rejects that story, how does he explain the verses? Because the Quran clearly talks about a marriage, a zawaj. You can't just ignore the words.
This is where the linguistic analysis gets really interesting. He argues that marriage, in this context, is a metaphor for authority and rank.
A metaphor? That feels like a bit of a stretch.
Stick with me here. Think about the academic world. When a doctor specializes, they get a fellowship, right? In Arabic, the word for a colleague or fellow is zamil. The status of holding that fellowship is zamala.
Zamala. Okay, I can hear the root connection there.
Dr. Waleed argues that the zaj, or the pairing, mentioned in these verses, isn't a domestic marriage to a woman. It's a pairing with a spiritual degree, a high rank.
So when the text says, we married her to you, zawajnakaha, it's not talking about a bride.
No. The her refers to the zamala, the fellowship, the rank itself. God is saying to Muhammad, we have paired you with this supreme authority. We have granted you the chair.
That completely reframes the divorce then. The verse says Zayd accomplished his want from her.
Right. Kadawatara. Dr. Waleed interprets this as the Israelite scholar, the Zayd, reaching the natural conclusion of his tenure. He recognized that Muhammad was the true successor he'd been waiting for.
So he stepped down.
He voluntarily divorced the position. He yielded the chair. He didn't dump a wife. He handed over the keys to the spiritual kingdom.
Wow. That's a massive shift in dignity.
It is. It turns a story about awkward domestic relations into a story of humble recognition. The Grand Rabbi looks at the prophet and says, you are the one. My time with this authority is finished. It belongs to you.
It solves the scandal. There is no scandal. It's just a transfer of power.
A peaceful, witnessed transfer. And Dr. Waleed points out that this makes Zayd, the scholar, a hero. Not a passive victim, but an intellectual giant with the humility to recognize the new revelation.
This fellowship concept, this zamala, it actually connects to another term people might recognize, al-muzamil.
Yes. Surah 73, muzamil.
Which is usually translated as the wrapped one, right? Like wrapped in a blanket.
That's the traditional image. The prophet shivering from the shock of revelation.
But Dr. Waleed applies the fellowship logic. If Zamala is the high degree, the spiritual rank, then Al-Muzammil isn't the guy in the blanket.
It's the guy with the degree.
Exactly. Oh, you who holds the fellowship. Oh, you who has achieved the rank. It's a title of supreme honor. It signifies the transfer is complete.
It gives the name a weight that Rapt One just doesn't have. It sounds presidential.
Dr. Waleed says this is why the prophet is considered the most noble of the people of earth. Not because of his lineage, but because he achieved this specific degree. He passed the ultimate oral exam in the cave.
And speaking of names, this process also explains the shift from Ahmed to Muhammad, doesn't it?
It does. Dr. Waleed sees these names as markers of this very progression.
Ahmed comes from a root, implying one who is praising or seeking to praise more. In Dr. Waleed's timeline, the prophet is Ahmed while he is in the seeking phase, engaging with the Israelite scholar. He is the candidate.
So Ahmed is the PhD student?
Effectively. And then, once the marriage happens, once the authority is transferred and he becomes the Muzammil, he becomes Muhammad, the praised one, the one who has arrived.
It's a coherent arc. You start as the seeker, you receive the transfer from the incumbent, and you become the authority.
It provides a logical structure to the names that often just seem interchangeable. It turns the biography into a career progression.
Now, there's one more major linguistic correction he proposes, and it has to do with who gets to keep this authority. We hear the term al-bayt all the time, people of the house.
And this is crucial. This is where the political meets the theological.
The standard definition is that al-bayt refers to the prophet's family, his daughter, his cousin, his grandsons. It's a bloodline.
And Dr. Waleed says that definition is linguistically lazy. He draws a sharp line between two words that sound very similar, al and all.
They sound almost the same to an English ear. Break it down.
Al, with a long A, refers to your clan, your biological lineage, your kids, but all implies qualification or competence.
Can you give us an example?
Well, think of our PhD analogy again. If you work your whole life and earn a doctorate, you are all for that degree. You are qualified.
Right.
When you die, does your son inherit your PhD?
No. He inherits my house, maybe my money, but he doesn't become doctor just because I was.
Exactly. Your son is your family, but he is not necessarily all qualified for your job. Dr. Waleed argues that al-bayt refers to the people who are qualified to serve the Bayt, the house of God.
The sanctuary.
Yes. He argues it would be illogical for spiritual rank, which is based on divine selection, to be inherited like furniture. You cannot will prophetic authority to your grandkids. God chooses who is all.
So al-bayt isn't a dynasty, it's a meritocracy.
A divine meritocracy, a class of leaders chosen for their capacity.
And this sheds light on that famous verse about removing impurity, right? Allah only intends to remove rees from you, O al-bayt.
Correct. Traditionally, people read rees as sin or even physical uncleanliness.
But Dr. Waleed disagrees.
He defines rees as doubt or intellectual error. He says God is protecting these qualified leaders, the all, from falling into logical traps or misinterpreting divine law.
It's intellectual protection.
It's ensuring the fellowship stays pure. If you're holding the supreme rank, you cannot be prone to confusion. God protects the competence of the al, not just the morality of the al.
When you zoom out and look at this entire framework, it's honestly staggering how different it is from the Sunday school version.
It's a total reconstruction.
We've gone from a personal story, a man in a cave, his adopted son, a controversial marriage, to an institutional story. A prophet in Jerusalem, a formal treaty with the Grand Rabbi, a transfer of the chair of authority.
And notice how it strips away the soap opera elements. Dr. Waleed's main gripe is that the traditional stories lower the status of the prophet. They make him look like he's caught up in desire or domestic squabbles.
Right. This feels more dignified.
In this reading, every single action is theological. The travel is for knowledge. The meeting is for succession. The marriage is for authority. It elevates the entire mission.
It also radically changes the relationship between Islam and the previous faiths.
That's a key takeaway. In this view, Islam didn't start as a rejection of what came before. It started with the head of the previous faith literally handing the baton to Muhammad. It's a story of continuity, not just disruption.
It makes you wonder why the folklore version took over. Why did we lose this technical, high-level understanding?
Dr. Waleed would say we lost the Loqat al-Arab. We stopped analyzing the roots, like ziyada for increase or zamala for fellowship, and we let storytellers fill in the gaps with local gossip.
So, for the listener, the learner who might be hearing this and thinking, okay, this is huge, but can I verify it?
Yeah.
What is the value here?
The value is in the method. Even if you don't accept every conclusion he draws, he is forcing you to ask, what do the words actually mean? He's stripping away the layers of tradition and demanding we look at the source code.
It's an invitation to be a mustazid yourself, to seek the increase in knowledge.
Exactly. Don't just accept the translation. Look at the root.
Before we wrap up, I want to leave the listener with one final thought. We've talked about the what and the who, but I want you to think about the when.
The timeline paradox.
If Dr. Waleed is right, if the cave was the rock in Jerusalem, how does that rewrite the prophet's life? Traditional history says the prophet didn't go to Jerusalem until the night journey, years into his mission.
But if the first revelation, or this early fellowship phase with Zayd, happened in the Cave of the Rock, then the prophet was in Jerusalem at the very beginning.
It implies the mission was centered on the Holy Land from day one.
It suggests the connection to Jerusalem isn't a later addition, but the foundation. If Zayd, the Israelite judge, was there, waiting for him, it means the transition was the opening act of the drama, not the intermission.
That is a thought that could keep you up at night. It completely reorients the map.
It certainly does.
A massive thank you to the work of Dr. Khaled Waleed and his channel, Almighty Covenant, for providing the material for today's deep dive.
It was a pleasure to try and unpack such a dense theory.
And thank you to you, the listener, for keeping an open mind, keep asking questions, keep digging for the roots, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.